So that's going to leave us with just an overview of the 5 kingdoms of nature. So how is this all working? The concept of the 5 kingdoms of nature is inspired by the work of Professor Dr. Lynn Mingles in her milestone reference work called The 5 Kingdoms of Nature. There's also a website that you can look up called ZERI, Zero Energy Research Initiative. And they go over this in a lot more detail, but just to give you an overview. She describes the kingdoms of nature as bacteria, which is, she describes bacteria as being anything that's characterized as bacteria and they have a lack of a nucleus. So there's no nucleus in the cell wall, it becomes a bacteria. Algae, protozoas, as scientists call them, this domain is a mix of slime molds and algae. So anything that's like slime molds and or algae. Fungi include molds and mushrooms and have rich biodiversity that is largely unknown. We do not even know in about 95% of the cases how to distinguish a male from a female mycelium. So you can't tell the sex in 95% of the mushrooms. Plants are the most recent arrival on Earth. There are millions of unknown, but their beauty has inspired poetry and they know how to procreate in cooperation with animals. So there's an animal relationship that they basically animals tending the plants. Without that symbiosis relationship, then the plants die, the animals die. So animals, yes, the largest number of species are worms. We are most likely descendants of worms and not of chimpanzees. It is not a pleasant thought, but as recent discovery, actually we have to believe the scientific hypothesis of Dr. Lynn Margulis that we are descendants of bacteria, or better stated, descendants of symbiosis of bacteria. After all, 10% of our body weight is still bacteria. So we carry 10% non-living human DNA. So where did we develop from? The ability for the symbiosis relationship for the bacteria to move. That's her theory. But some of those theories are a little bit out there, but the basis of the energy concept with sustainability, well, that's different. That's more like math. So let's see what that means. Zero Emissions Research Institute, 5 design principles. So this brings into their concept of how you can design any system to produce no waste. So how do we not produce waste in modern society? There are 5 kingdoms of nature: bacteria, algae, fungi, plants, and animals. And for billions of years, these 5 kingdoms have worked together to be highly productive and adaptive systems. Along with the 5 kingdoms, there are 5 key design principles that each kingdom, except man, generally adheres to. So we have our free choice, right? And then our free choice, when we make it, typically breaks the rules of the 5 kingdoms of nature. Whatever is waste for one kingdom is the nutrient or food for another species belonging to another kingdom. So everything can be consumed by something else belonging to a different kingdom. What is a toxin for one organism is a nutrient or neutral for another belonging to another kingdom. So even the most toxic thing we may want to describe as toxic waste or nuclear waste. Bacteria has been found living in the reactor in Chernobyl. And they've gone in, they have crazy people that actually dive in nuclear reactors. And they've collected the bacteria and they can now grow that in a lab. So if they want, they can have bacteria eat the nuclear waste and turn it into functioning fertilizer. The sad thing is they're not going to do that because they like to utilize it in nuclear reactors. So whenever highly complex ecosystems operate, viruses to remain inactive or even disappear without causing harm, passing through at least 2 other kingdoms. So this is how our septic tank works. When we take our waste, which would have our pathogens that could be transferred to someone else in our species, right? But if we put past that through 2 other kingdoms that are different than our kingdom, the animal kingdom, then when it comes back, it's no longer a pathogen to us. We can't, so viruses have not been able to like jump kingdoms. The more local, the more diverse a system. The more productive, the more resilient. So things that are local are easier, they're resilient. So like the local plants we have here in the garden, you were asking me like, hey, why's that amaranth got all that? That amaranth to be that red color is very hybridized. Okay, so Lynn bought it, the hybrid, brought it in because she thought it would look nice in the garden because it's really red. And the bugs, because that's not local, they just are destroying it, versus the normal or localized amaranth, which is the green amaranth here, and doesn't have it next to it, doesn't have a single bug. This is the difference, that localization is more resilient to predators. So whenever species of 5 kingdoms live and interact, it is an autopopic system. This means they can integrate and separate all matter at ambient temperature and pressures. Okay. Nature, when it phase shifts, it doesn't produce heat typically, and it doesn't use pressure. Almost all of our manufacturing processes that humans have come up with uses heat and pressure to shift phases. And when we see nature, it doesn't do that. So she's going to go into the next level of manufacturing, how we can start to think about letting nature do the work without utilizing so much energy, because temperature and pressure requires lots of energy. So number one, so these are principles that you can kind of think about and utilize as a design concept along with permaculture. So this only strengthens permaculture, right, guys? As we saw with the thing, it's not taking away from it, it strengthens it. Whatever is waste for one is a nutrient for our food for another species belonging to another kingdom. So what does that mean? If one species is fed its own waste, it will degenerate. Okay? When cattle farmers started to feed cows with waste from other cows, they violated this principle, and it led to the mad cow disease outbreak. Shrimp farmers made the same mistake when they started to feed shrimp with their own waste, which led to the white shrimp virus. A lion will eat an antelope, but never ever will he consider the manure of the antelope. There are exceptions which confirm the rule. A dog may be spotted eating occasionally its own waste, though this is a matter of strengthening its immune system, challenging it so once in a while. If an animal were only eating its own waste and behave as a cannibal, it would never survive. So we don't see that in naturalized systems. So if I left the worms without feeding them new food in their own waste, they'll die. As long as I'm taking out the waste and giving them new foods, they'll live. So industry and society should apply the same logic. Waste from one industry should not be forced back into the same system, searching for a closed loop. This will increase cost, jeopardize quality, and hardly ever generate the best possible value. Industries should cluster together, cascade their waste streams, and generate more income, more jobs, thus increasing productivity while eliminating waste. So we end up going and building this factory way over here that produces a waste product, and there's no one nearby to take the waste product. If we would more so understand the output-input relationship of nature, then you could put all the factories kind of in line, in a circle, right? And this waste goes into this one, and this one goes into this one, and then there's no garbage. Because why is there garbage? It's just garbage is only unutilized products. And then we just say, well, I don't want that, and throw it away. So whatever is a toxin for one is a nutrient or neutral for at least one species belonging to another kingdom. If a species eliminates toxins within its own system, it will degenerate. This is the concept of us living in sterilized apartments in cities where we never go outside, never touch dirt, never do anything, and the kids are always sick, okay? Because they didn't get immunity built up as children, and then they get sick as adults. As humans, we tend to classify things that are as toxic only from a human point of view. We assume that anything that is toxic for humans must also be toxic for every other species in every other kingdom. Cyanide is a well-known toxin for animals, but several plant species produce it and use it effectively as a defense against predators. Apples are rich in cyanide, and so are peaches, though none have been labeled dangerous cyanide inside. It's just a quantity issue. The elimination of toxins by passing through the other kingdoms does not mean you have to die first. If you, a member of the animal kingdom, are ill, then balance your system with the presence of algae, fungi, plants, and bacteria. The illness that affects you will dissipate in the wake of an abundance from nutrients and antibodies provided by examples: spirulina algae, reishi mushrooms, antiphilus, biophides, garlic, avocados. So all of these being high in these nutrients that help us to stimulate our immune system. So if you're sick, boost your immune system versus trying to stay away from something. So whenever there is a virus, it will be eliminated passing through at least 2 other kingdoms. If we reduce the number of species and recycle nutrients and energy within a kingdom, then viruses will thrive and the system will degenerate. Viruses are species and kingdom specific. A virus that can attack a plant cannot attack an animal. This is the reason why the constant cycling of nutrients and energy from one species to another is making life for viruses impossible. This is why viruses are made This is why viruses have made life impossible, since the environment of one species evolves into a new species belonging to another kingdom. So evolution, once something starts getting attacked by a virus too much, it evolves and it changes kingdoms. And when it does that, the virus doesn't move. But then the virus can develop in that kingdom and then they move. So evolution, changing species and kingdoms. So human beings are 10% bacteria, and therefore a virus that lives in one could also live in another kingdom. Lichens are a symbiosis of mushrooms and algae, and therefore viruses could navigate within those two kingdoms. That is why cycling through all 5 kingdoms is that important, since no virus is known to survive in 3 different species belonging to 3 different kingdoms. So that's the idea of transferring waste, what might be waste or harbor pathogens to us, when we transfer it through 2 kingdoms inside of like a septic tank, which we'll look at in our water systems, which is described as a living machine. When we utilize the living machine, the bacteria colonies, they transfer it and it comes out as functionally drinking water. You can then take the water and drink it and you will not get sick. You might not want to because you can feed it to a plant. But then if you put it to a plant, that's even a 4th kingdom, and then I eat the plant. So I'm not going to have pathogens. Systems are more efficient and more reliant the more diverse and the more local they are operating. If non-native species are forced to become part of the local ecosystem, it will degenerate. Plants and trees in coexistence and coevolution with species belonging to the other 4 kingdoms will create the best, most effective system from within the boundaries of its own microsystems. This is the description of biomes. So where different plants have created biomes and they stay within their own biomes. The more variety, the more fun. No one on earth has ever witnessed a situation in which a group of plants and trees in a temperate climate feel the need to bring over some fungi from the tropics. This does not mean that there is no crossover as migratory birds demonstrate, though the core production and consumption regeneration of leftovers of one as a food and a value for another is local. Transportation is kept to an absolute minimum in nature. In our global economy, we want everything from everywhere at any place and time. This leads to a massive transportation system which contaminates our environment and causes massive induction of non-native species. At the core, there's only a few local species left, which together evolved over millions of years. We have increased the fragility of our own system because if few of the remaining links break, the whole system could collapse. The more local the activities, the stronger they are, and there will be much more flexibility as diversity within a local system increases. A system that is local will be more efficient and resilient. It's a wonder if you're sitting here as Westerners in Thailand and I'm teaching you as a teacher in Thailand that we're helping Thailand. You think bringing money over so that they can chase after it, so they can want all the things we want, so that they can describe and turn into Westerners? We export our thoughts, we export our activities, we export our culture, and then everybody turns into the exact same thing. And if that culture fails, there's no other backup cultures. And that's what she's going on to. So if you like that kind of thought process, her book is really interesting, and she has a way of seeing things which is interesting. So not everything I would say I agree with, but it's a very interesting take. Yes, the 5 kingdoms of nature. Because it's just a very, very synopsis of her work. Okay, her work is a very large subject. Whatever species of 5 different kingdoms live and interact, it is possible to integrate and separate all matter at ambient temperature and pressure. When matter is integrated and separated without involvement of all kingdoms, then the process will cause entropy beyond the energy provided for by the sun, meaning that we lose energy, not create energy. And remember, going back to permaculture, our systems are supposed to provide more energy than it took to create them. So this is what she's trying to talk about. A spider makes its fiber at ambient temperature and pressure from diverse raw materials. The moment tension is removed from the web, it starts disintegrating. No spider applies the closed loop concept and tries to eat its own web in order to increase its production. Though the spider succeeds in this endeavor through a tightly knit cooperation with the other kingdoms. So it disintegrates, gets brought back through the like bacteria and comes back up to the plant or the animal that the spider eats in order to produce new thread. Okay? So he doesn't eat his own threads. Industry has arranged for an intensive supply chain management, which requires precise and uniform raw materials which are converted at high temperatures and pressures, causing a massive amount of entropy. Whenever matter and energy is solely produced and then consumed for the benefit of only one species, or what we describe as core business, then it will remain highly wasteful and can only achieve its goals causing noise, nuance, waste, and deteriorating our environment. If industry were to emulate the all-inclusive approach by nature, which will constantly search for the participation of as many representations of the five kingdoms as possible, then we would be able to respond to the basic needs of all people on the planet with the energy supplied by the sun. And if for some reason one species would be missing and as such waste and entropy would be created, the system would spontaneously generate that species. The ecosystem will create new species through symbiosis relationships. So whenever one thing goes out, a new species is created. So currently we can describe that we're losing a large species on the planet. We're losing the mammals, for instance. But insects, they're finding more, and that they find an exponential amount more new species per day in a scale of 1,000 than we are losing large species. So it doesn't mean if one is lost, and that might be if you think about Gaia theory, the response of the ecosystem, if the larger species also are pressuring the ecosystem will drop this and make this. And she's describing this spontaneous evolution when one thing is thing. So if we make too much pressure, we can't do it. But when we fall out, something else will fill our niche, if you will.